Howdy and welcome to the Strange West Podcast. This is your host and word hustler extraordinaire, Trent Tano. Bringing us in as always with their rendition of Eno Marconi's For a Few Dollars More is the mighty Mitch Polzak and the Royal Jesus. If you like your guitar singers like you like your gunslingers, then head on over to MitchPolzak.com. That's Mitch, Polzak.com. In tonight's podcast, we continue the Cowboy Vs Nazis action in Chapter 19 of Paris High Noon by yours truly, Trent Tano. Want to get your Cowboy Vs Nazi on? Then head on over to ParisHighNoon.com. Both paperback and ebook are available at ParisHighNoon.com. Paris High Noon t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other swag are available at Society6.com/Trentano. Both the mustache t-shirts and Paris High Noon t-shirts are available at Society6.com/Trentano. And as always, a big thank you to James K. Doyle for lending us his time and his talent to the podcast. He really does bring the voice of Paris High Noon alive. So without further ado, here is Chapter 19 of Paris High Noon.
Chapter 19, The Ways of a Woman. At the Body Maid, Jean didn't see the fight coming. His mind was drifting on the warm buzz of alcohol, absinthe, and thoughts of Moue. When he was knocked to the ground, Jean scrambled between the shoes and boots that fell around him. By the time he made it underneath the table, he couldn't find Catfish or St. Jude. His heart quickened and a sweat broke out across his forehead. Then someone picked up the table he was under and threw it at a gaggle of men, who were busy punching and scratching at each other like cats in heat. A German grabbed Jean by the collar, lifting him to his tippy toes, and cocked his arm back with a fist the size of a ham aimed right at Jean's face. One of the cocktail waitresses, the one that was stroking Jean's hair, smashed a bottle over the Hun's head. Jean stumbled into another brawl. A well-dressed Parisian hit Jean from behind and hurled the boy to the wall. Through the cacophony of the Donnybrook, Jean realized it was up to him to save his own skin. He looked for an exit, but found none. Bottles and chairs flew across the room. A table crashed through the window, and the night air rushed in. Jean jumped through the broken glass, rolled onto the cobblestones, and ran as fast as he could from the flex-wielding clubs on the drunken crowd. Jean ran into the gas-glow night, wishing he had a horse. His breath was coming up short, his head buzzed, and his vision blurred. He stumbled from one boulevard to another until he began to recognize the neighborhood. Then Jean saw it, the Happy Flower Cafe, where his old life ended and the new one began. It had been boarded up like an abandoned mine, only rats and the wind to occupy the empty spaces. Catfish and St. Jude warned him not to go back to the Happy Flower once they returned to Paris. Those Bosch vipers will be watching, St. Jude said. Catfish was less dramatic, but nonetheless stern. I've known plenty of competent bandits who got nabbed in a town they robbed because they figured it would be the last place the posse would look. It's a gamble either way, but hanging from a rope is a high price to pay for sleeping in a feather bed. Jean searched the area and didn't see anyone around. A red dawn lit up the sky. He wouldn't be able to make it to the catacombs by daybreak, so he decided to hold up in the old cafe. One of the basement window planks was peeled back, leaving enough room for a fat badger to wiggle through. Jean pulled back the plank and jumped into the darkness. Once inside, he heard a scuttle upstairs. Too loud to be a rat, it had to be a person, probably some tramp. Jean pulled out his revolver and edged his way up the stairs. Every muscle in his body was coiled up like a bronco ready to buck. What he saw upstairs was the last thing he would expect, and the one thing he thought of most. Moue stood in the corner behind the counter in a dirty dress and a bright red scarf flowing around her neck. Slants of morning light from the boarded-up windows cut her image in the shadows. Jean tucked his revolver in his trousers, went around the counter, and took her into his arms. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me you haven't been here this whole time." Moue started to cry. "They beat me," she cried out, between sobs. Jean held her tight, while tears both bitter and sweet leaked from his brown eyes. Moue looked up at Jean. Slivers of the morning light cut across a face that looked more like granite than the moon-faced boy she knew. The boyish fat had melted, but it was his eyes that had changed the most. They were hard like desert dirt. If Jean's mother were still alive, she would drop dead at the sight of her chubby-cheeked boy. At the thought of Madame Malheur, Moue cried even more. "She's dead," Moue said. "Your mother is dead." "I know," Jean said, trying to comfort her. "How could you have known?" "She had a weak heart," John said. "I figured Mother didn't even make it to the police station." "She did make it, but she didn't last long," Moue said. "A priest came by the day after I was released to bury her in the church plot. No one was there but me and a few old-timers to throw flowers." Moue instantly regretted her cruelty at telling Jean such a thing, but she wanted him to understand all of what she had been through while he was off riding through the Norman countryside with some old cowboy. Yet the little boy didn't shed a tear for his dead mother. Somewhere along the trail, Jean had buried some of those soft things. The change in Jean startled Moue so much, she backed out of his arms. "You've been with the old cowboy all this time, haven't you?" she said with some heat. "You left me to the Boche." "I didn't have much choice," Jean said. "Besides, it was rough living and hard travel. I doubt you would have liked it much." "And do you think I like it here?" Moue cried out. "Do you think I like shitting and pissing in the other room? Do you think I like living like some rag picker?" Jean's jaw tightened up. The idea that the woman he loved had been forced into such deprivation brought a red-hot feeling. He wanted to find the nearest German and gun him down. Moue swept her hand across Jean's face, cupping his chin in her palm. She looked him in the eyes and pouted her lips. "Let me come to you." Jean's jaw dropped, and his brown eyes brightened up, becoming the lovesick garçon. Then his eyes dropped, and doubt crept in. He didn't know whether or not he could bring Moue back to the hideout. Catfish didn't leave any instruction on the matter. His only order was, if they got separated, to make his way back to the hideout. Jean's gut told him not to bring Moue back, despite the ache in his heart. And like every man who walks the earth, he listened to the wrong organ. Moue wrapped her hand around Jean's face and kissed him full and deep on the mouth. And just like a kick in the head, those lips destroyed whatever doubts were forming in Jean's mind. Moue pulled back. "Last time I saw you, you ran away and left me to the Boche. Now I'm asking to come with you." Jean looked long and soft at Moue. He risked going into the cafe and was rewarded with Moue. Taking her back to the hideout was an even bigger risk, and he would gladly take the reward or the consequence. Outside, the weak light of the morning sun was getting stronger by the minute. Jean took Moue's hand. "Then let's go." Moue hesitated. Her fingers went to her throat. Jean pulled out his pistol and showed it to Moue. "Don't worry. If anything happens, I can take care of it." Moue's eyes went wide at the sight of the gun. She remembered when Jean shot the sergeant with a rifle and wondered what else the old cowboy had taught him. Her fingers slipped off the red scarf and grabbed Jean's hand. They went downstairs, where Jean kicked a few boards loose from a window and scrambled up to the sidewalk. He tucked the gun away and helped Moue out of the window. They walked down the boulevard hand in hand. Richard Rouge sat in a tilted chair, half asleep and feeling angry. From the third floor of an abandoned apartment, he could see the front of the Happy Flower. He was tired from all the watching and waiting, hoping that the shortcut to his ambition would arrive soon. Richard was well aware of the size of his small outfit, which only fueled his endeavor for a bigger share of the PCF range. It made him a tough trail boss to ride with, but those few hands who rode with him knew that quitting the communist brand wasn't an option. Moscow wanted every red to toe the Nazi-Soviet pact line. He could have had one of his underlings do some of the watching for him, but trust wasn't Richard's long suit. Besides, he wanted all the credit, the praise, and the promotion that would come with the capture of the old cowboy. There was also a new black-clad sheriff in town, and he was putting the pressure on the PCF for action. So far, Richard had been able to avoid Black Bart, but that wouldn't last long. He needed to get some actionable intelligence. Richard had no idea how to find the old cowboy, but he did know how to get to Jean. Richard remembered the jealous look in the boy's eye every time he came to the cafe to pick up Moue. When Gerald found Moue at the lazy left, Richard treated the girl right, while sweating it up between the sheets twice a day. When Moue's legs weren't up in the air, she acted as his secretary, where Richard treated her with a lover's cruelty. If things went south with the war, he didn't want the burden of Moue or her heart. Richard was about to drop both eyelids when he caught a glimpse of Moue and the boy crawling out of the cafe. He could see the red scarf around her throat. Richard cursed. Moue was supposed to tie the scarf outside when Jean showed up. Then he would come down and make the brat talk. Now the brat and the pretty Judas were leaving, taking the whereabouts of the old cowboy with them. Richard scrambled out of the abandoned flat and down the stairs, pushing a few old ladies who had the misfortune of getting in his way. By the time his shoes hit the cobblestone, Jean and Moue had disappeared from the boulevard. He looked north and south, but saw no signs. He had to choose quickly. Richard took the road south, running fast enough to take a good look at the side streets and alleys. He caught a glimpse of red scarf across the wide Saint Germain. Richard eased his pace, moving through the morning crowd like a snake through the grass, always keeping his prey within striking distance. Jean was moving at a fast clip, pulling Moue by the arm, dragging the girl along the cobblestone. From time to time, the boy looked back, but Richard was a master hand at seeing without being seen. Every now and then a gaggle of German soldiers would march along the block, but they paid Jean and Moue no mind. Jean went around the Jardin du Luxembourg, backtracking along the Boulevard Saint-Michel south and then west. The crowds were getting thick, and Richard was having a time keeping his sights on the red scarf. At a crosswalk, he got held up when a bus unloaded its passengers. Richard cursed at them like a cowboy with no patience for dumb animals. He made a dash across the street looking for the red scarf, pushing his way through the crowds. When he reached the cemetery du Montparnasse, thousands of tombs and headstones created a marble labyrinth. For hours, Richard walked the grounds and then moved in an outer spiral through the whole arrondissement. By dusk, he gave up and returned to Montparnasse. For hours, Richard walked the grounds and then moved in an outer spiral through the whole arrondissement. By dusk, he gave up and returned to Montparnasse. Somewhere in the dark underground maze of the catacombs was the old cowboy, and Moue was going straight to him. The notion that Moue didn't do what she was told made Richard's blood boil and his disposition curdle. He taught her how to leave messages with dead drops, how to signal a fellow red and other little bits of spycraft before he sent her out to lure Jean. They had a talk. Or more to say, Richard spoke and Moue listened. Keeping a woman on her toes was the best way to keep her honest. Once they started getting comfortable, they started to lie. Richard kicked a tombstone and almost broke his big toe. He cursed Moue, threatening the girl with vile and horrible acts. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the graveyard. Richard weighed his options. He could tell the SS about his hunch and then let them take on the task of picking up the trail in the catacombs. That way he could still claim credit for capturing the old cowboy and get his reward from Moscow. But there was no guarantee the Gestapo would find them with this information alone. Richard needed the true location of the old cowboy. He didn't want to earn Black Bart's scorn.
And welcome back to the Strange West Podcast. Once again, this is your host and word hustler extraordinaire, Trent Tano. Well, that about does it for our Cowboys vs. Nazi action tonight in Chapter 19 of Paris High Noon. Remember, if you want to get your Cowboy vs. Nazi on, then head on over to ParisHighNoon.com. The paperback and ebook is available at ParisHighNoon.com. Paris High Noon t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other swag are available at Society6.com/Trentano. Once again, Paris High Noon and the Mustache t-shirts are available at Society6.com/Trentano. And again, a big thank you to James K. Doyle for lending us his time and his talents to the podcast. He really does bring the voice of Paris High Noon alive. And sending us out, as always, with their rendition of Eno Mariconis for a few dollars more is the mighty Mitch Polzak and the Royal Deuces. Please check them out at MitchPolzak.com. And thank you, as well, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Until then, happy trails.